Okay. And then Nancy, I'll turn it back to you to welcome David to our meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I am delighted to introduce David Alley. He has been a vital member of Together Colorado. Did we ever come up with, has it been 2 years or 3 years, David?
I think it's only 2, actually.
I think it's only 2 also. Yes, about 2 years ago, I was invited by one of the core members of the Climate Justice Committee for Together Colorado. This committee has only been meeting and organizing for 2 years now, and it's amazing what they've done in 2 years. But I remember walking into that meeting, and there were about 20 to 25 people in that room, and I just sat there in awe of the level of expertise, the level of passion, dedication, hard work. Most of these were faith community leaders. It wasn't like they just sent a committee person. The faith leaders showed up for this meeting. And I just sat there inspired and actually overwhelmed. It was just amazing. And David has had a pretty powerful role with this committee. In fact, it was just about a year ago next month that he moderated the meeting that we had with Governor Polis, where there were over 300 of us from many faith communities meeting on Zoom with Governor Polis to discuss the climate issues. And David just had a wonderful ability to stay focused, stay on target, respect the various opinions, and yet at some point he was able to, not in these words, but in his own respectful way, say, "You're not answering the question, let's try again." So, and you can see why David, his background, like so many of the faith leaders at this committee, he's actively engaged in social change efforts, particularly reparations and climate justice, impact investing, and mentoring historically underserved entrepreneurs. He's an active member of First Unitarian Society of Denver's Board of Trustees, the Denver Foundation's Reparations Affinity Group, Together Colorado's Climate Justice Committee, and Good Business Colorado. He has his business back. He co-founded Designs for Learning in 1992 and served as president, vice president, and CEO, and retired in 2021. So he's been doing a lot while he's working, and now that he's retired, he has just continued to pursue so many of these. He has his doctorate in curriculum and instruction from the University of Memphis, with an emphasis on adult and higher education. And he serves as director of institutional evaluation and planning, associate academic dean, and vice president for student services at a small church related in Arkansas. And you can see how he just has so many experiences that really make it significant for the effort it takes to be involved with these social justice issues. But there's one more characteristic about David I wanted to share, because to me, this is one of the most meaningful parts about how dedicated, how much he's willing to put into hard work. He enjoys running, and he has run in the Twin Cities Marathon in 1992, 94, 2014, 2015, and the Boston Marathon in 2016. And he's a non-technical mountain climber, Longs Peak 6 times. So that kind of willingness to work hard and the persistence and perseverance, that's what we need in social justice and climate justice. So he is here to tell us more about his role in how Together Colorado's Climate Justice Committee can work with us and we can work with them. So welcome, David. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Nancy. That was lovely. You know, maybe glutton for punishment could also be an adjective that
Yeah.
could be described. I'm not entirely sure there, but I appreciate the opportunity to to visit with you for a few minutes. And I appreciate that First Plymouth is, thinking deeply and seriously about how to be more engaged in some of these almost seemingly intractable problems that we're facing. And I look around the room here, and our grandchildren are not with us here today physically, but I think a lot of us have a kind of heaviness when we think about the future, and we think about the kind of world that we're leaving for our children and grandchildren and future generations. So I propose to try to stay focused here and talk a little bit about how you all might choose to engage with Together Colorado Climate Justice Committee in particular. And I'm happy to respond to questions as if you want to raise your hand as we go through. And Nancy or anybody else, don't hesitate to speak up if I miss things, because I'm going to be doing some screen sharing. And if I don't see your hand up, let me know. And I'll try not to get too much on a soapbox and go too long. Someone advised me, no disrespect intended, that I perhaps should be aware that there may be a new 12-step program being formed for people who talk too much. It's called On and On and On. Just sorry, little humor there, but
Yeah, we need
so let me try to do the screen share, and I will also put from time to time things into chat, which will just be links that you're free to use or not use. As you may know, at the end of the session, you probably, I see it's enabled that you can actually save chat. And
Yeah.
so at the end, your computer will automatically create a little text file that'll have everything in chat. So some of these links may be useful. So the first one I'm putting in is the link to Together Colorado. However, I'll do a screen share, I hope, that will take us, if you can manage that, and I know Zoom can get to be kind of complicated, but hopefully you can see the Together Colorado website. Does that show up okay, Nancy? Can you see?
Actually, the only thing that's showing on mine is David Alley has started screen sharing, but I don't see a Together Colorado screen.
Okay, my computer little hourglass is spinning, so it may
Oh, okay.
take a minute, and if it doesn't show up, I'll try that again. But yeah, it's still spinning. And it looks like Zoom is not responding. So if for some reason my system goes down, I will try to get back in as quickly as possible. But right now it's not cooperating. So let me, if you can still hear me, let me go ahead and just say a bit. I think you all know a good bit or know something.
Did we lose David altogether?
Or he's frozen. I don't know which.
Oh,
There he is.
David, we don't hear you.
Okay, let me,
Oh,
okay. You're up
There it came
now.
up. We see you.
we hear you and see you.
okay,
And we
good.
see the Together Colorado screen.
Yes.
All right, it just is very slow, but it is working. That's good news.
Okay.
So, Together Colorado has a number of what they call federated community committees, and the mission is what's indicated here to work in a broad spectrum of ways. Criminal justice has been one of the ways that they've been involved quite successfully, actually, in doing what is called, they call a penning action. The chief of police, my goodness, year and a half ago, at shorter AME, was kind of called on the carpet about a police process of, I think it's called show-ups,
Mhm.
where some states have even banned the practice because it tends to produce a lot of false identifications. And one of the members of Together Colorado's son was actually the victim of that here in Denver, and eventually was cleared, but it's a bad practice. And after significant research, Together Colorado did a really lovely meeting with the chief of police and others, many faith communities. Again, I'm not sure whether policies were changed, but it is to create social change in a number of areas. So Nancy mentioned the attempt that we did with Governor Polis. This is a model that is part of Thin Action. It's a way of organizing. I put the link in chat. Our attempt to the governor to take firm positions on significant climate reduction efforts was not successful. We asked the questions, and he is a good politician. And clearly, we're a state where oil and gas are very powerful. And so he was unwilling and has continued through the people he has appointed to the Public Utilities Commission, Gas Commission, Air Quality Commission, Colorado, various executive branch departments are in the minds of many of us, allowing quickly enough to enforce the kind of change that we really need. And that the folks in Englewood are again dealing with. You know, it's not that half measure are useful. So without on the road with the rubber meets the sky here, let me just take a moment to share credential of the Climate Justice Committee. Important to sort of see that as standing for where we're coming from, and hoping that the share will happen a little faster here. Can you see the Together Climate Justice Credential?
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
David, I don't know if it's
the-
just me or everyone, but you are cutting out quite a bit when you're speaking.
Yes, I don't know. Let me see if I can close any of these other windows. Sometimes that will help. If I turn off stop my video, you don't need to see me. Can you still see the Together Colorado Climate Justice
Yeah.
Credential?
Yes,
We can see the screen share with it Together Colorado, and your voice is much better.
Okay, good. So you're not missing my face. That's not an issue. So hopefully that'll increase the bandwidth a little bit. And I realize this is a bit, but if you're willing to bear with me, I would like to read the Climate Justice Credential. This is something we did in the action with the governor. This is something we do in other research meetings. And if you want to read along, that's welcome. Or if you want to close your eyes and just listen and see whether this resonates, because I realize you're in the process of deciding who you want to partner with, who you want to collaborate with. And I'm going to suggest that that's a matter of the heart as well as the head. So see if this language resonates with your heart or head. Together Colorado is a nonpartisan, multiracial, multi-faith community organization that unlocks the power of people to transform their communities through community organizing. It's comprised of 220 congregations, schools, clergy, and faith leaders throughout the state, working together to put human dignity at the center of public life in Colorado. We're a member of Faith in Action, national faith-based network of 40 organizations in 20 states and 4 countries. Grounded in our faith and democratic traditions and in the everyday concerns of the people in our congregations, schools, and communities, we train and equip faith and volunteer community leaders to join together to resolve community issues on their own behalf at local, state, and national levels. Current key issues include economic justice, education, healthcare, immigration, mass incarceration, and care of creation. The Climate Justice Committee calls on everyone to engage in the climate crisis. The practice of faith holds moral responsibility to call all people around the world to use their voices, hands, and feet to live in harmony with planet Earth. This heartfelt unity between humanity and the planet draws us to our roots. We must stand up for the oppressed and abused, as we have for civil rights and human rights. So we must now for our shared home. The Climate Justice Committee seeks to lead and empower communities to collaborate and act with others sharing this focus. Through political action, voter engagement, community education, and expressions of faith, we can extend our hearts and stand in solidarity with the oppressed, abused, and abandoned. By changing our relationship with the world, we breathe healing into dark places and bring light where none is found. Resolutely confronting this immense societal and planetary crisis is our responsibility. So what I'd like to do is just give you a quick overview of what we do as a committee. And I think the best way to do that is actually to show you what is our agenda. We're meeting this coming Thursday, and I'll put the link in chat and do a screen share again, and just quickly walk through what we do in our monthly meetings, because I think that will be the clearest way of giving you a sense of how you individually or collectively can be engaged. So hopefully you see, or will soon be able to see, our Climate Justice Committee meeting for November. We meet on the second Thursday of the month for 2 hours. And the link I put in chat will give you a link to this same document. So if you want to join us, the Zoom link is actually at the top. You can't use it from screen share, but it'll be on what's in chat. We have volunteers from month to month that do the facilitation and co-facilitation, timekeeping, and taking of notes. Generally, we have about 20 people that show up for these meetings. There are about 150 on the email list that we send these notes out to. Generally, we have a time at the beginning where we connect with each other, and we're increasingly seeing that these small breakout groups are very, very meaningful, because there are lots of groups, the Sierra Club, Together Colorado, 350 Colorado, many other groups that have technical expertise that we may or may not have, typically don't have, but what we have is a faith perspective. And sometimes that voice is not heard. And sometimes we need practice articulating things in those terms. So on Thursday, we'll have breakout groups that talk about, how our faith guides our message for stewardship. And especially when we're dealing with those climate skeptics. I mean, Thanksgiving dinner is coming up here before long, and there are some of us that have family members that are still not entirely sure we can or should be doing things. So we spend a good chunk of the 2 hours in breakout meetings. Then we have a report from the larger Together Colorado, because we like to cross-pollinate. So Mike Cromery is the executive director of Together Colorado, and he works directly with our committee as a staff person. And Aya is also a new employee and is associated as a staff person with our committee and provides support. We do, we're doing a sacred land acknowledgement. And then we have 4 committees. So this is an opportunity for you all to do engagement in terms of 4 different dimensions of work. One is what we call the organizing committee. And this is a group that Jessica Abel leads. And they're very interested in forming collaborative efforts with others. There is a legislative team. And at this point, I can't tell you what the legislative focus will be for this next year, but that will be decided very quickly. A number of conversations. Jeff has met with Senator Hansen, who has been one of the really stalwart voices for progressive climate change legislation and prolific. He's also an engineer, PhD engineer. So he's a key resource, and Jeff and other members of the legislative team are working to identify the kind of key issues. And then we'll take, as a committee, take positions on which ones we want to be engaged with. Some of us will testify, for legislative committees, or some of us have testified before the Public Utilities Commission. So that's the kind of work that gets involved with organizing and legislation. We also have, Janelle does an incredible job pulling together education materials that can be disseminated broadly within the congregation. Sometimes it's what she calls a 101, the climate basics. And then sometimes it can be more larger specifics. And if any of you would like to see those, I'd be happy to forward the notes from last month. Nancy, you're on the list for those, and some of those were attached to the last mailing from last month. And then we have an expansion support group, which is working to outreach, to be more engaged, especially with communities that are in some ways the most harmed by climate action or climate inaction. We haven't made a formal decision, but more and more I'm hearing talk about 2 things. One, Suncor is a huge problem, is a huge polluter. And many of the people that live downwind or downstream from Suncor are climate victims, and that there may be an important role for us to take as a group, maybe working through churches in Commerce City and the other area there, or in other ways to back the efforts of groups like Green Latinos in working to as some of us have said, maybe we should close Suncor in 5 years and work on a just transition of that for the people that work there. The other thing that I'm hearing more and more is climate grief. I think a lot of people are waking up with anxiety, even depression, dealing with these climate issues. And so I think we're going to be doing more as a committee to train ourselves and to increase our capacity to serve others in thinking through how to remain hopeful. What does hope mean in these times? And if you're familiar at all with Joanna Macy, she's written a number of books. Active Hope is one, and she has a process called Work That Reconnects, and is the basis for I think, a constructive approach toward dealing with climate grief. So we wrap up the meetings with a number of announcements. There may be things that if you choose to participate that you would like to bring and announce for the 20 or so people that are there. And then in turn, we broadcast that out to maybe 130 or 140 people, some of whom do not come to the regular meetings. And then we gently twist arms to get people to sign up for future leadership kinds of roles, and find that this turns out to be a time that I think for many people is a way of sort of getting our own batteries charged. The last thing, I guess I'll just quickly, do we have time for like another 5 minutes? Am I running over time?
You're fine, David. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that that is, I think, unique about the work that Together Colorado does, and the Climate Justice Committee in particular, is what we call research meetings. And I'll put a link in chat that goes to a Google document and I'll do a quick screen share again, just because it's just an interesting process. This was the basis that we used for our meeting with the governor. And hopefully that's showing up now. Patty Lawless was our Together Colorado staff person who, goodness, I think had been there 30 years. And she just retired a few months ago. But this is her outline that I think is a very useful process, again, that we tried to use with the governor. We've used it with various other groups, and it's something that any individual member of the Climate Justice Committee can use. It's not like we have to always act collectively and appoint a committee and have a vote on things. You know, what we like is for individual members to pursue their passion and their energy, and then invite others to join them. We've got folks that are engineers, some of whom used to work in oil and gas. We have people that have a lot of different kinds of career perspectives. And so in a research meeting, we've used with, for instance, in Denver, you may be familiar that the city of Denver, we all passed a ballot initiative that creates about a $30 million a year fund for climate action. And so the Denver Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resilience, I think it's called, CASR, we met with the executive director, Grace Rink. And so we asked her questions. We talked about her faith background. And so we come to form relationships. So just in a nutshell, I guess I would say one of the things that we try to do through Together Colorado is relationship-based organizing. You know, we're not in a position where we can force anybody to do anything. It's not to say that we don't tell people to turn out and vote. Beth, I like your sign in the background over your left shoulder. I mean, it is important that we elect the right kind of people. And yet we need to form individual relationships as well with people in government. I have an aspiration that we would have a research meeting, a pinning meeting with the head of Suncor. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, but you know, I would love to have that opportunity, you know, to get into some kind of dialogue. I'm not expecting that we're going to be bosom buddies, but we also don't have to immediately be in a throwing brickbats kind of mode. We try to form relationships. And so we follow this kind of model. Pinning actions are something we do on a larger scale infrequently, but research meetings are as they say, grist for the mill. This is how we gather information, and can be a very useful process. So I will stop screen sharing and stop talking, and would be happy to try to respond to any questions. I'll try to turn my video back on, and if the sound starts breaking up again, give me a sign and I'll turn it off again. Any questions, or I'm happy to wrap up here. I know you've got other things to talk about. Okay, well, I would just, yep, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jan, do you have a question?
You're
You're still
muted,
on
Jan.
mute.
I didn't realize that you have staff people. Is that paid staff people?
Yes, now they get very little time assigned to us. Together Colorado, I think, has maybe 8 or 10 different committees, and they're involved in a lot of things. So there are staff people assigned to support us, but I think they would be the first to say they don't provide a lot of actual organizing time and effort. However, I will tell you this, that it's not a done deal, but Mike just wrote a grant proposal, which I think would be funded at about a $95,000 level. And that would, for the first time, enable Together Colorado to have a climate lobbyist. In the past, the Together Colorado lobbyist did not work in climate. That was not her thing. And I don't know why, but you know, they cost money. And so there is some additional staff support, hopefully coming down the road, including lobbyists, which will make our ability to do things legislatively, I think, more effective. So it's not a done deal, but hopefully that'll happen, Jan.
That's great, because anything regarding the legislature is it's just it's so hard for volunteers to
Exactly.
handle it, figure it out. But that's great. Really interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So David, question from Pam here. It just feels like Together Colorado has such a good organizational structure to cover these important topics. And for us, it's just a faith community where it's a small group of us here, mostly faces you see here, that are even talking about the subject. I'm just trying to figure out how, like, let's say the Suncor issue is one that we really feel strongly about air quality. Can we request to be put on a certain email list without getting the huge ball of wax where we would feel like, oh my gosh, I can't wade through all of this? Is there a way to, I'm trying to find a way to narrow it down for us. If we could pick a particular area and then become active in that area.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, and Nancy can weigh in on this as well, we're extremely flexible. And we send out that agenda list goes out monthly to 130 or 140 people that have signed up to be on that list. Okay. And some of them come to the monthly meetings, some of them don't. And they all get to see the agenda in advance. And if they come and say, hey, I've got an announcement, here's something I want to do, who wants to join me? That's fine as well. So there really are a lot of opportunities, and frankly, we can create new projects. One of the things that I personally would like to see is Together Colorado has an affordable housing committee that I think is not doing a whole lot right now. But I personally think it'd be very smart if we would do net zero energy as a part of affordable housing, if you follow me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that kind of collaboration is something that nobody else is interested in, but I'm interested in. And so I'm reaching out to the person that heads the Together Colorado Affordable Housing Project. So okay. I would say this is a piece of clay that continues to be molded and shaped. No one's getting stuck in a kiln at this point, and so there's a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
I think the other is, I mean, I don't receive, my inbox is not full of Together Colorado. I think they're very respectful of the inboxes, and they're very comprehensive and concise in some ways. But as you saw on the agenda, there are leaders for each of the committees, and each of those committees has a monthly meeting. And so people, if there's a certain area that you're interested in, can sign up to receive, either attend the meeting or to receive the minutes from that meeting. So I think there are ways that you can make it a little bit simpler and easier and focused on exactly what you want. Because I mean, that was my experience at the first meeting, overwhelmed. There's so much going on. So to pick and choose your topic and then contact that leader and be put on the email list for that group, I think would be really important way of being able to stay connected with the area that you're interested in.
Good point, Nancy. And I would suggest, if you want, that last email that I sent out a couple of weeks ago after the October meeting, if you still have that, that had attachments that included the minutes from the prior meeting. And it also had all of those education documents that Janelle had created.
Okay, yeah.
So if you still have that, you might send it to your colleagues here and they would get that as a sample, but that's a once a month thing. And then there'll be a second follow-up. Here's the next agenda for the next meeting. So I appreciate the point about inboxes are crazy these days, and we try to respect that.
Yeah. I know as I represent First Plymouth at the Together Colorado meetings, and then once I received the minutes, I have tried to pick and choose highlights from those minutes in order to send it to the group. I mean, our 9-10 people here, but then we've got a contact list of what, 25 or 30. But you know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what people are interested in, but I try to highlight it so they at least stay informed.
Excellent.
And we've got a great pastor and communication director who picks up on some of that stuff, and it goes in our weekly emails. It's pretty impressive.
Well, if I could just leave you with a parting thought, I'm taking up too much time here, but it sounds to me like you're at a decision-making process. And I think strategic partnerships are important. And because I'm an educator, some of you may even remember the 4-H club, 4-H program. If you're from rural America, you know about the head, heart, hand, and health. I think those dimensions are all important in making decisions about who you want to partner with. And so I would suggest you follow the energy, you know, and that you think about collaborating with us, with 350 Colorado, with other folks at First Unitarian Society. It turns out we have a church member who is a lawyer with Western Resource Advocates. She's a full-time lawyer dealing with climate issues. And so you have to figure out how to form these partnerships. And my wish for you is that you think, where can you find synergy? You know, where can you get results that are going to be greater than the sum of the parts? And I really want to thank you for your work. These are tough things, and it's hard work, but I think together we're able to accomplish much more than we can individually. So if there are no further questions, I will sign off and leave you to the rest of your meeting and wish you well.
Okay. Thank you very much, David, for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Before we move on, does anybody know how to copy those links in the chat and save them for us? I don't know how to do that. Can't hear you.
Pam,
Nancy.
if you go down to the little dots at the bottom of the chat, and it says save chat. If you open chat.
Yeah. I see the little dots. Where is it going to save to, Beth?
I think it saves to a Word document. It says chat
Yeah.
saved. I did it. And I'm pretty sure it saves to a Word document, Pam, in your
Yeah.
documents. That's where I've gotten it before.
Okay, so it'll come to my computer. It's not going to go out to the cloud somewhere.
No.
Okay. All right. I will look for it because that was helpful just to have those as documents, I think.
Mhm.
I've saved it too, so between the three of us, one of us should be able to figure out how to summarize all those. So
Okay.
send them out. Yeah.
All right. Well, while that's fresh in our mind, I sort of rearranged the agenda so that we talk about the new business first, and then we can quickly go through the information towards the end. But I think it's time for us to talk about, what are our next steps after we've heard from these three organizations. My recollection is that with Environment Colorado, when we heard from Rex Wilmoth, they had just passed the plastics bill, and he said that the next likely bill they were going to be talking about might be something about producer responsibility, reducing or taking back packaging. Now, I know that there are other things that Environment Colorado was involved in too, but those were the two that I remembered, and others can jump in if I'm forgetting something. And then last month, Duncan Gilchrist from 350 Colorado was talking a little bit more about energy, building a fossil-free future powered by 100% renewable energy. And also was expecting maybe a major bill that would be addressing air quality that might, relate to what David just talked about, Suncor. I guess I'm not sure whether, how are we going to, as a ministry, pick a particular area like, electric vehicles or plastics or clean air, and just focus on that? Or are we still trying to just be the disperser of information as it comes to us and hope that different people in the in our faith community will jump in, when they're ready and interested? I guess I like what David ended with, is follow the energy, find synergy by connecting with others. But I don't have a vision of a path towards that. So just would be interested in your thoughts. Where do you think we should go next?
Pam, I missed the last two meetings. I'm very sorry. The three organizations are rethinking about key elements that they might have to offer that are important to us. Pam might have just outlined a couple, and who had most of those elements available in their organization. I mean, it's kind of like taking proposals, RFPs, or whatever you want to call them, and saying, boy, this organization best meets our needs. Or do you partner with all three, and what does that mean to us? Does it mean anything financially? We're already members of Together Colorado, isn't that right? Or yeah.
Well, I thought the purpose of having these groups come to talk to us was to try to narrow our vision, to zone in on a particular area of interest that we could focus on, and then maybe pull from the different groups in that area. So I don't know that we've chosen a particular area to focus on, or whether we're still just all over the board trying to gather information.
I guess it was my recollection, and I guess my perspective, that we really struggled last winter, spring with looking at legislative advocacy and how we can be efficient and effective with doing that. And we take one step forward and one step back, and we struggle with different pros and cons of different things. And so it was my understanding we were hoping to maybe get some clarification or some direction of how we might be better able to consider legislative advocacy. And I'm not sure if we got clear answers on that, but that's my understanding of how some of this conversation got started.
Okay. Well, any one and all three of these organizations that we've heard from, I know would be, supportive to whatever direction we want to go. But I think I guess the way I'm looking at it, it's up to us to decide what that focus is going to be, so that we know what direction to go in.
Well, I kind of heard a few different things today. I wasn't present before, but I agree with Nancy. We talked a lot about advocacy and legislation in Colorado for climate change. And we found that I did find it very troublesome to keep up with. And both Steve and Nancy had more in touch information than the rest of us, it seemed, last year, but it was still hard to, get together something that we could look at together and decide were we going to do a letter campaign, or, what was our next step as a congregation? Is there something we want Jenny to get involved in, because she will get involved in things like this. So legislation was one, but then I think there's the element of what information we want to share with our congregation, not just to be the provider of information relative to climate change, but what might be most important and how do they get involved in that? And maybe even in the ministry, in our creation justice group. And then it seems like there's a lot of other things, Pam, like, what do we do with the church? What do we do about cars? What is net zero? I don't know if there's another group, but a grouping, and which organization might have. But it seems to me that, yes, I agree, you might have been all over the place, but there's a lot of consideration about climate change. And then I would just add in this one thing, and I don't mean to get into visiting the other church that Bruce and I were a part of, but one of the things we heard loud and clear from them is, and I've heard here, and I've heard from church council, I've heard all over the place at church, it comes up every single time. We've all said it, is that we have to stop saying that we can't afford it and then brush it aside. That was one of the biggest takeaway messages from the Unitarian Church across the street, that we have to find a way to afford it. And the best example that we got was like replacing a 5-year-old furnace that has another maybe 10 or even more years. That, great, we spent money on a furnace, but if we're trying to combat climate crisis, it's time to think about what to do with, how to get a furnace replaced and not let that furnace be reused and continue to use fossil fuels somewhere else in the community. So you don't sell it, you destroy it, you recycle it. So kind of a different, in my opinion, different way of thinking about this.
There's one more piece of the puzzle that I want to offer that gives a different way of thinking, that I've really been motivated by the adult forum that was held on Sunday, where, I regret I don't remember the woman's name, but she presented a lot of research and statistics that I first thought, oh gosh, this is just going to be really boring. But it really was interesting to talk about what is the future of church, our church, anybody's church. Church is becoming a dying breed. And what can we do? So many people there talked about, they have good memories of church as a kid, and their children and their grandchildren aren't attracted to that. What needs to happen? And she presented statistics about growth in church. And the one piece that I took from that is she really emphasized that one of the main indicators of church growth is its vitality. And so I've really been thinking about that word vitality, as I'm going to be meeting with racial equity tomorrow and today, is like each ministry keeping in mind, what can we do as a ministry to create and maintain and sustain vitality for our church? So that's just kind of an additional piece of the puzzle to lay out here. But I think it's important to step back and look at the big picture. Jenny is real clear. She's seriously looking at the future of the church. And I just don't think we should put our head in the stand and say the church is always going to be there and we're always going to have worship service. It doesn't look like it's going to go that way. So yeah, how can we maintain vitality in this ministry? I don't have the answer to that, but I just thought it was a good question.
Well, it seems like if one of our goals is to engage our faith community's participation, we need to start at our own front door instead of starting with sending emails to people they don't know. And so as Jenny walks into this new worship by doing, which I think we can talk a little bit later, there's going to be a new service starting, a 9 o'clock service in January.
Mhm.
What can we as a ministry plug into there, whether it's creating signs for composting, or whether it's planting a tree or weeding the gardens? I don't know what it's going to be, but what is it that we can do as a community in our immediate area that will bring in multi-generational participation and not just continually, I mean, I see that our role is to still spread information, you know, use the updates for connecting people to other opportunities. But maybe I'm at a loss for words on what can we be doing rather than just emailing.
One of the things I was wondering about, because I heard Alex talk about the children's group is going to be building some kind of nativity set from recycled items. And I thought, well, I wonder if Creation Justice was contacted for any consultation or support or ideas around that. Again, you know, how can we cross paths with one another? Does anybody know if anybody was contacted on that? Or I'm not sure necessarily that they need our help, but to be a community that works together as a team on some of these things.
I've got my personal bag started to bring on Sunday, but I haven't, you know, spread it. I haven't spread the word other than what Alex has done.
No, and Alex did not contact us and say, I'm doing this, what do you think, or how can you help us? I think what is happening with Alex is this is just, in Noni Geister too, is, you know, we talk about when these things built into your church's DNA, and that's what's happened with Alex. I mean, she thinks of these things on her own, which is, I understand what you're saying about the relational aspect, but it's also really wonderful that we're not going to them and saying, you know, we don't want to use live palm fronds. Could you do something with recycling? You know, so I think that there's enough sort of awareness and action within some of our staff members now that they just kind of take the ball and run with it.
Okay, well, I'm not sure where else to go with this right now. I think we've tossed around some good ideas and maybe need to just continue the dialogue. I just don't want to let go of, I think these 3 groups that have come in, they've been valuable connections. And I think there are resources that we can go back to when we have a need or when we have a particular focus.
Well, and I would also add that, you know, Phyllis has a relationship with Environment Colorado. Amy has a relationship with Denver 350, and Nancy and Steve have a relationship with Together Colorado. If our goal is to motivate our congregation, or at least those paying attention in the advocacy realm, when it will benefit a piece of legislation to hear from constituents. We have three sources that can suggest information, if that's our goal. If our goal is a deeper relationship, as a group of, as a ministry, or down the road as a congregation, I think those are the kinds of things that we have, that we can, we can talk about. I mean, what do we see? What do we want?
Mhm. Yeah, I see some benefit to having some kind of connection to those outside organizations. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to do the research. We can just, get their email and show up for their meeting, especially if one person doesn't have to go to every meeting. It's like, three of us going to 3 different meetings, and then just like I've been doing, pooling what I think is the important information and sending it out to keep people informed. To me, that makes sense, but that's just my perspective.
It's been very helpful, Nancy, for you to share, to highlight and share those highlights. That's been great. Steve, did you want to speak, or you?
Yeah, your mute isn't, he's trying to get off mute. There he is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so a couple things. I've been sort of paying attention to several of these groups and trying to reach out to my representative, who him and his staff have been very quiet about the upcoming legislative session and whether or not he's going to be involved. He hasn't really interacted with the green energy community group that he formed. And so even as we heard David talk today, you could tell that last year, going into legislative session, Together Colorado had taken a very combative position with Governor Polis. And that didn't sound like it had changed in the way couple comments he had made. Because we sort of, and I think a lot of this comes from the fact that Democrats have control of both parts of the legislature and the governor's office. My biggest concern is that Governor Polis now, that he was asked to do a lot of things with very little staff and very little funding. So he's put out a new budget this year. His budget proposal doubles the air quality personnel in that office if he gets it approved. I mean, and that'll go through this whole legislative session of trying to fund out of the general fund a doubling of the folks that are going to enforce all these new environmental regulations that have been put on the books and his roadmap. My biggest concern with supporting some of these organizations is that they have, it's a very important agenda, and being part of this group, climate justice, is really important. But we're going to take a huge hit climate justice wise in the state of Colorado if we lose control to the right. And they're already actively working this. My biggest concern is that these environmental groups, instead of getting after Polis and after our more moderate legislators, need to consolidate the gains they have and realize that they're already under attack. I mean, there's a whole group of GOP representatives in the state that have sent a letter out, and they're already campaigning that we can't afford all these environmental measures, and look at your gasoline prices that you're paying, and look at your gas bills that you're paying. And my concern is that I would like to see these groups get behind Polis because he is an environmental friendly governor. And I would like to see a united front. So when it comes to some of these groups and some of the things they're advocating for, myself as a more moderate type person and someone who's looking down the road, instead of saying, we've got control now, let's pass all this stuff and worry about it later, I'm worried about having all this stuff removed, because if we lose control of the legislature in this state, we might really be fighting an uphill battle in, say, 5 or 10 years. And that just might be the end of hitting the goals for reducing carbon emissions and the goals we need to achieve, and hitting that 1.5 degree maximum increase in temperature and all. So as someone said in this, it is very complex. There's a lot of issues out there. And so I'm real hesitant to really commit to any of these groups, probably less so with Together Colorado, because it's a multi-faith group and they really don't get as deep into the weeds with certain bills and everything. But for me, I feel a little bit overwhelmed. From the church perspective, with our mission, I really am looking forward to seeing the service of worship fleshed out, Jenny's idea, and how we can have certainly our ministry have a big share of that. I know I'm supposed to be involved in it. I haven't heard anything more from Jenny about when it's going to be meeting, but obviously a couple of you have been talking with her about it as well. So maybe when we get to the mission team report, I'll hear more, because I haven't heard how that's going to be fleshed out. All I've heard is it's supposed to start in January.
I think Nancy and I should be transparent and tell you that we had our first meeting last week. Jenny has identified a number of people that are participating right now in the development of that worship service. Right now, we're talking about an 8:45 worship service that will be intergenerational. And I do think that's different, Pam, than multi-generational. It's intergenerational. And that there will be all kinds of facets of trying to develop that service through things that might be brought into worship that are common and we're comfortable with, and other things. But I don't think you're going to see anything that looks like church as you've known it. It will all be more of the service of action.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of talk about music, and I do know that Jenny and the team will probably continue to grow this group. Right now it's relatively small. So I don't know what they've talked about at Mission. I should also be transparent with you and tell you that I've joined council, and I went to my first council meeting in October.
Thank you, Beth, for your service. I'm so glad that you're on council. You have such a wonderful voice to share different topics. So
Thank you, Pam.
You're on mute, Pam.
sorry.
So, hey, Beth, who's on that group, or who was in that group that met?
I don't know that everyone was there, but the two folks, Nancy and I, Jenny, Eric, the two Isle of students working on their, I think they're working on their PhDs. Let me see if I can get their names out of my mouth. I don't know if I can, maybe Nancy can. Kent Lemberg, the Spillmans, Heather and Jason. Did someone miss the meeting? Oh, Nancy, that you remember? I think that was everyone that was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amanda Shaw, blah, blah, is one of the Iowa students, I'm sure. All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we'll keep talking and seeing where we can plug in to these. I think we've got a lot of ideas going now, a lot of different avenues, and can't do it all at once, but when the opportunity arises, I think we've got the background to know where to turn to for resources and for support. So I think that's been productive. So let's just quickly go through some informative topics here. Bruce, did you say you have some information about the e-waste?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just got it an hour ago or an hour before we started the meeting, and it's good news, not as good as last year, but last year was amazing. So we got the bill for basically $5,600 and we collected $10,000. So we made $4,500 roughly. I don't know. I'm trying to compare what was different between last year and this year. And their categories somehow split out differently. We collected almost as much tonnage. We collected 14,000 pounds and this year and 16,000 last year. So I have to say it's a big success. And I've already submitted the bill to Lisa and they're going to be paying it. It was a great fellowship activity for those of you who helped work that day. It was a lot of fun, always is. And I assume a certain part of that 4,500 will go toward the Green Energy Fund. That's yet to be determined.
How does that get determined, Bruce?
Well, this group decides. How does what get determined?
So the Creation Justice Ministry determines how much of that $4,500 ends up in the Green Energy Fund and the rest goes in Creation Justice. Is that what you're saying? Or are there expenses from the church that we need to cover?
What do you mean expenses from the church? I'm not sure.
Well, there was staff there that day. I don't know if we have to cover that.
No, we're not covering that. That was donated, which is a change from past years. But Carol has been very generous in having people out there. Of course, we take all the e-waste from the church and put it in at no charge.
Well, help me remember, last year, it was originally all put into the Green Energy Fund. Is that right? And then we had it removed and put back into the general fund.
I don't think it ever went in. No, I think it always, as for this year, I assume it went into the general fund, and then we decided a portion of that would go to the Green Energy Fund.
Okay.
Part of it.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge portion. It was 95% of it. I mean, we did.
No, I don't think it was that much. We collected, we made $7,800 last year, and I think we put in 6,000. It was a good chunk, but it wasn't 90%.
You're right. It wasn't 95%.
When Bruce, when you all refer to general fund, is that the Creation Justice Ministry general fund or is it the churches?
No, it's not the church fund. It's the Creation Justice.
Right.
And we've been spending it. And I since we're all here, I've mentioned this informally to Pam while we were planting trees. The last major piece of the LED conversion is the outdoor parking lights on the south parking lot. We already paid for the bulbs themselves, but there's 9, they're installed on 9 tall poles out there, and we have to hire a Bride Electric with a cherry picker truck to put them in there. And so I kind of made a deal with Carol Hainsey that, we'll pay for half of that and the other half would be considered general maintenance of the poles. So that is what I hope that you can approve that idea. And it was $1,000, $1,200 just to put the bulbs in. So $600 for the poles and then another $800 for the bulbs. So the parking lot part of the LED project was major. I mean, it was almost as much as the whole inside of the church, but then we had to have it done partially professionally.
So Bruce, are you asking, do we need to ask approval for the 50-50 split, or is that already a done deal? Or
Well, I guess it's it's kind of a done deal, but I mean, I would appreciate some support on that.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me just for sake of minutes, you think that it was $1,200 for the cherry pickers?
About 1,200 and some odd, $25, I believe the number was.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Another successful event. Do you think that fall is still a good time to shoot for next year?
Seems to be, yeah. And by the way, I've all the signs and everything and the banners, which I used to store in my garage. I didn't even know this for sure, but I left them there in the church. They're in the shed. And it was providential because we're moving in a week from this house. So
Wow.
it's a much smaller place. So I don't know, I'll still be involved, but if you want to find someone to do more active part of it, that's good too. But the stuff will all be there, centralized at the church.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, for all you do on that. It's such a successful event, and without it, we wouldn't have these, funds to do other things. So thank you for all you do. Let's see. Sorry, on the first agenda that I sent out, I have this down twice. Once was from the old agenda, but anyway, there was a group of us who went to the First Universalist Church on the 29th of October to have a tour of their energy saving renovation of their building. Part of the group was a group of Sacred Land participants who took Nancy Rosenberg's Sacred Land class last spring. And then another part of the group was our net zero task force. And so we were together for the beginning part of it, and then we kind of split off into two different groups. And I just wonder, Bruce and Beth, could you share just some highlights of what you what you learned from the tour there?
Yeah. Well, one of the highlights is what the heck is geothermal? I mean, I'm an engineer and I really hadn't focused that much on it. The geothermal means two different things. One, out in California, you get hot steam from the ground and you bring it up and you spin turbines and you develop electricity. But when we talk about geothermal nowadays here in Colorado, we're talking about heating and cooling a building, not doing electricity, but heating and cooling a building through tapping the temperature 400 feet down below the building. And that was brought home in spades by looking at this model that they had there. It was very dramatic how it's like 55 degrees down there. And so in the summertime, you can cool the building using that temperature differential. And in the winter, it's the reverse with a lot more technology of heat pumps and everything. So it's very simple technology. It's reliable, and the detailed information that Chip Cole was there, and Larry Strasser and Bill Blunden, and those guys, quite knowledgeable in all of this. And it was a great tour that we had on that subject. And the other part of that was how they financed it. And I don't think it's quite as bad as what or maybe worse than what we faced, that they were told that they could not spend any more than they're already spending on the electricity and heat in the building. So that they really had a struggle to sell this, as Beth was kind of indicating. They did it through about half of it was they went to the congregation and just had grants and donations for, I don't know, $200,000 or something like that. And then the rest they did to the same people probably, but the rest of the congregation, they got low interest loans of 1.5%. So that's the way they were able to do it. And they're going to continue to expand it and they're almost at net zero. They're like 3/4 of the way. By the way, they consider it is what their next phases are going to be. And one other funny little part of it is They want to put in, or maybe they have already, charging stations for electric cars, Teslas and so forth. But they're going to run in reverse. They want people to charge their Tesla at home, bring it to church, and plug it into the church and run the electricity from the car to the church, and thereby reduce our peak demand. And since the electricity from Excel is charged by the peak load that you draw, that's really an excellent way to reduce our energy bill, not our energy use, but our energy bill. So I found that was fascinating.
Bruce, I think they're already doing that. They had charging stations out front.
Right, I know, but yeah, well, I didn't have it. They said they could run the whole church on 6 Teslas. I thought that was-
Right.
Mm.
So we did,
I did attend the group that the men went to. I'm sure they still wonder why I'm there, but Bruce didn't mention I was in his group. But I found it fascinating. I think it's a beautiful change that they've made there. It was very informative. They're using solar geothermal. They had reclaimed wood in their sanctuary, and it was just beautiful. The way that they used the wood around the kind of octagonal or circular type of sanctuary ceiling that they had. I did tell you about the conversations about stop saying we can't afford it. They did talk about they still need to replace the gas stove because it is one of the things that's still fossil fuels for them, and they haven't been able to do that in the kitchen. They want 100% of the cars in the parking lot to be electric. They do have a goal for that, and they are doing, as Bruce explained, trying to get people to, part of their getting to net zero is including the mileage that all the congregation drives to and from church. So that's part of their calculation, and part that they're still not able to get rid of. And then I thought that, we had all kinds of different expertise that went, and I think everybody was fascinated with the geothermal. I was fascinated with it too. I mean, that's a long ways down in the ground, and then bringing that water back up. And they also have a shower in their church, as we do. We kind of crawled through a really well-kept, I thought it was well-kept, Bruce, didn't you, basement. They've done a really good job. They found different ways to bring heat into the sanctuary that looks decorative, in wood with kind of contemporary holes in it that brings the warmed air back into the sanctuary. So they also were really careful. They've done the lighting changes that we've done, but so much more that we've done. And they talked about, they had an old building too. And when the last time they did, and I would say, Bruce, that their sanctuary is beautiful, but that's not to say ours isn't. They're different, but they don't have a lot of the more, I don't know how to say this. We have a lot of legacy pieces that we brought into the sanctuary and kept, like the stained glass. They have a rather more modern look, not so ornate. And ours is not heavily ornate like St. John's is, but we have a lot of art and pieces, and not so much of that. So I wouldn't say the church is cluttered, but their church is really, they're trying to diminish their load as well, decluttered.
so, and Beth, I didn't mean to exclude you as being one of the members, sorry, but
It's okay, Bruce.
you're very, very valuable, and giving a much more complete analysis than I did. But those guys are, registered engineers, registered architects, and it was good to have them there to see all this.
Oh, I'm not saying it wasn't.
Bruce, could you clarify, was it 400 feet or 4,000 feet?
No,
that it went to?
400 feet.
400, okay.
I always knew the water went down and then came back up, but I didn't know. Well,
Right.
one hole goes down, another hole goes back up. No, they put one kind of hole in the ground, and then these joint pump pipe that's connected at the bottom goes down and up, all in the same hole.
Yeah, yeah.
Very interesting to see how it all works, and then they ground
Right.
it so that the water can have its transfer of heat or cold easily.
Yeah. I just would like to add that from my perspective, I thought it was amazing how they've really taken this on as a mission to educate other groups and other churches. They have information like near their light switches and in their sanctuary, explaining the changes and why they made those changes. Downstairs in the furnace room, there's a whole description about the different pieces of the remodel and what they've done. They've written a book about it, and I think they've shared the book with Larry so that he might, benefit from it with our group. So they've really taken this on as not just to improve their own building, but also to share with others. I thought that was
Yeah.
good.
So as far as what we can do, that's the thing. You guys started the net zero energy group, and that's where our effort ought to be as far as going out and doing something. And there's a lot to do. And when we come to the financing, there's going to be really a lot to do.
Yeah.
You
But we don't have to do it. We don't have to do it all at once, as they were a little bit at a time.
And I guess I'll put the elephant on the dining room table. I'll call it out. Jenny is pretty clear about some messages of questioning, do we keep this big church or not? So it's like, how do we balance, taking care of our earth and creating this building that really takes care of the earth when I know we're looking at getting solar panels and they keep asking us, are we going to move? And it's like, well, we're in our 70s. I don't know. So do we go ahead and do the right thing regardless of how long we're going to stay here? Is the church going to do the right thing no matter how long they stay in the church?
Nancy, can you say more about that? I mean, some of us around the water cooler kind of talk about that, but then we say, well, we're kind of tethered to this building. We really are. There's not a lot, at least I haven't heard a lot of serious talk about moving. I mean, has Jenny really got that high on her list of things?
No, I wouldn't say it's serious talk, but she's been free to mention in her sermons, it's like, do we need this big building? That's what they said at the adult forum. It's like, do churches need these big buildings to pay all the expenses?
Oh, I agree. It's way bigger than it needs to be. And there's going to be a lot of reports coming out, but I don't want to scoop the finance committee and all that's being done. But there's a lot of concern about our shrinking population, our shrinking budget, our shrinking pledging and everything like that. And that's why they're going to reorganize the assets that we do have into one big First Plymouth fund. To try to address the shrinking population and pledging, and our expenses are going up, and that's irrespective of what we might be coming up with on net zero. So yeah, it is a concern. But what I've heard is, well, living in Cherry Hills Village like that, we just simply, there's no market for our building. I mean, it's kind of a stranded asset, but it is an asset.
Bruce, and Nancy, I haven't heard anything about the sale of the church. Nothing quite that bold. What I've heard Jenny say is more philosophical, is that our place to be in church is anywhere in the wider community, and that we don't have to be here in worship to have church. And that we could use the physical plant for other things to produce revenue. And that there is a shift in mainline Christianity to, one of the interns at church, Nancy, I'll mess this up because you were going, but, people are worshiping in bars and making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that are going to the homeless or to shelters or wherever they're going. And we talked about those kinds of things in the, the new style or new approach to worship at 8:45. But it was just talk. It wasn't, here's exactly what we're going to do. And there was a lot of discussion about in the past, we've housed homeless people overnight in church for a week at a time. Many of you here remember that. Some of you weren't with us yet, but there was also conversations about a school being able to be, maintained in the church during the week. And I mean, there was a lot of discussion back and forth. And I've heard this in a variety of committees that I serve on, but Bruce, I haven't heard a word about selling the church. It is an asset, but there are other assets. And, but I do think in order to get clarity, those are questions for Jenny, because I don't really know all the answers.
I've heard about selling, and the answer is it's impractical. So, we're stuck with it. So that's what I've heard.
I think the idea is how can you balance the budget when the building is so expensive? And so, like you did a good job, Beth, of explaining some of the ideas of creating other revenue within the building to move forward towards making it more compatible with the climate issues. Still would be important, regardless of what direction it goes.
Okay, can we move on?
Sure, let's go. We don't have a lot to go. I'll breeze through mission team report. We've already touched on some of those things. The racial equity team has invited Attorney General Phil Weiser to come and speak to us in an adult forum in January, I believe. So watch for that. And let's see, Bruce, you've already talked about the roof patch was done, but there's additional roof repairs to be done. There was a lot of tree care that was done, both with Bruce's volunteer group and from a professional tree company.
No, that's to be done.
That's still coming. And then
a couple of weeks, yes. Yeah.
And then the pruning that's done will also help us to create some mulch that will be used on the beds. On council, we celebrate that Beth has been appointed as a council member. So thank you for that, Beth. And you mentioned that the merging of the different First Plymouth funds, it's going to be called the First Plymouth Fund, that merges the endowment, the Brandt Fund, and the foundation, but still needs a formal vote. And you'll be hearing more about that. New member process, there's going to be new member coffees the fourth Sunday of every month. They'll only be half an hour in length, and they'll be both live and via Zoom. So we're simplifying the process quite a bit, and Heidi is still organizing that. Let's see, I think you know about Amy, what's her last name? Amy Hill, our new friend Amy is organizing mental health first aid, and there is funding for that. It's an 8-hour program, partially face-to-face, partially on your own. So if you are interested in that, you can contact her.
She's also, by the way, going to take over Lois McCloskey's job.
Oh, really?
Pastoral care. Lois is going to retire after the first of the year.
Wow.
It's announced that in the Web of Care meeting Sunday.
Okay. And let's see, we talked about Jenny's report, doing and serving, working with partners as a 845 service coming up in January. And the leadership task force, which consists of Rush and Heidi and Rita and Amanda Newsom, they're looking for input from current leaders on what did you need to know when you became a leader? What can we tell new leaders coming in to give them more support. And the approach is to let people know that we're coming to them because they have good qualifying characteristics for being a leader, and not because we're desperate for help. It's more of a reaching out for their strengths and talents rather than begging, please come and fill this spot. Okay, and there will be a new leader orientation every year. Okay, sorry, that was just kind of zipped through, but Mission Team is very informational. If anybody would ever like to go to Mission Team on behalf of Creation Justice Ministry, I'd be happy to take a turn. And just the last couple of things, Bruce and Adrian and myself, and let's see, Diane and Ken Hoagland did get to participate in a Highline Canal tree planting, which was delightful. It was so well organized. Everything was there for us. It was good camaraderie, good fellowship, and the 5 of us got to work together with a wonderful leader or two. And it's a really, the Highline Canal Conservancy is a very well-organized group that I think we should continue to partner with. So hopefully we can do some more things with them in the spring. And then just lastly, well, 2 things. We have Adult Forum this week on Sunday. There will be someone from Natural Funeral to talk about green burial practices. And that will be both live and via Zoom. And at Mission Team Outreach said that they had not decided on Share the Plate recipients yet after the first of the year, but I'm hoping that we will again have April. So be thinking about an organization, maybe someone that's tied into some of the things we're already doing that might be a good Share the Plate recipient. Okay. That's all I have. What else does anybody else have that we need to cover? Yes, Phyllis.
I have 2 topics. One is spiritual and one is political. And
Okay.
the first one is around grieving. And this is sort of amorphous, but it's sort of like one's spiritual path for me. And that is, I don't think grieving and loss should be a separate thing. It really needs to be integrated into many, many aspects of our work that we are together very committed to. Having said that, I think grieving generally in our culture and in some of our religious practices is sort of a bit short-sighted. We have trouble allowing that to happen. And yet, as we move towards not being happy-clappy, but actually being deeply rooted in hope, I think the only way to get to a hope that is sustaining is to totally flesh out and allow grieving to happen, which is for me, body and mind and spirit. There are no hopeless situations, none. There are only hopeless humans. The second thing is I'm interested in Steve. According to my screen, he may still be muted, but Steve, I'm very intrigued by some comments you made. And I think given our discussion, and Pam and Jan, thank you for highlighting what we've done the last 3 months. As you know, I'm very involved in Environment Colorado. I am not ego attached to the choice being that, but I do believe it's important
Phyllis, we're not hearing you. Something's breaking up.
to become concretized. This committee, I believe, we need to be concretized, which leads me to ask Steve, which you can answer tomorrow. I have an idea of a consolidation force, along with others, of course, behind our governor. I agree with you. It's he's environmentally sensitive governor, and I agree with you. We need not only to pass everything we can because we have the situation, but we need to look longer out. So I'm asking you about your opinion about that, or yeah, I think there's meat in that, what you said, and thank you.
Well, you're welcome. A lot of what you just said is still breaking up, and I'm not sure whether it might help if you killed your video briefly while you're speaking. But I appreciate that you appreciate what I said, and I've just been reading because I am as a moderate. I sort of watch what everybody's doing, and I've got family members who are well to the right of where I'm at. So I hear both sides, and they're organized and ready, and they plan on taking the governorship away, and they're hoping very strongly to get at least one house back, which will pretty well block future legislation and potentially remove some of the bills that were successfully passed. Meanwhile, the governor's trying to get the funding to be able to enact what's happened. So, yeah, I would. That's why I'm going to attend this Thursday's Together Colorado meeting. I've just been sort of following along in the background, but I sort of want to hear if this is still a trend that it's going to be sort of a far left or nothing, and the governor's not far left enough, and because I really think this is the legislative session to get locked in behind the governor, accomplish some things that every Coloradoan can appreciate. And I mean, his budget, I mean, we need to look at the positives in his budget, like he's planning on electrifying every school bus in the state, and these kind of, I think he's taking a well-rounded approach, and he understands that a lot of his constituents, need to live for the next 5 years. They can't just shut off their jobs, and they can't all just start paying 4 times as much for gasoline and for natural gas. I appreciate your comments. Thank you, Phyllis.
All right. Well, I agree, Steve, your thoughts are really important, and let's see what we can, if there are things that we can do to, especially in our conversation with friends and family. I think that's a really important issue to start to talk about. I think we'll probably skip our December meeting and just take a break, enjoy some holidays, some family, and reconvene in January. And I know a couple of people have said that they have been unable to attend our meetings because they are in the afternoon. So unless there's anybody who strongly objects here, you're our faithful attendees. I think we may try a 6 o'clock, or no, probably 6:30 would be better, don't you think? What do you think? Give people a chance to have dinner most of the evening.
6:30 is the time that the RET group meets, and it does seem to be a good time where people who are at work have come home, but it's not so late for people that like to go to bed early. So
Okay.
6:30 works out good.
Okay. So we'll try for 6:30, and in the meantime, if you have items for the agenda, please send them to me either while they're fresh on your mind or anytime between now and then. And we'll continue to have conversations and yes.
Pam, you had also indicated that there was going to be a question of do we return to in-person or continue on
Oh, yeah.
Zoom? And I know the RET, they tried in person a couple of months. And, you know, especially for an evening meeting, most people said Zoom works just fine. I don't want to drive at night. I don't want to have to be in and out during, you know, when it's dark out. And I think only 2 or 3 people showed up the first time. It was fun to see people, but if you're comfortable going inside, people are meeting at church service and they have quit doing hybrid and they're going back to just Zoom. So, I mean, Creation Justice could try that, but that's what happened with RET is for an evening meeting, the Zoom worked out better for most people.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, I was assuming that we probably would do Zoom, although I know on the agenda I put a question mark there. Anybody have thoughts otherwise? Beth?
No, I just have something different altogether.
Okay, go ahead.
I appreciated Phyllis's comments about grieving. And there's certainly enough of it going on in my family. I have a brother who is in ICU in Ohio with COVID-19. He's 62 years old and has lymphoma, and he's unvaccinated. He got lymphoma from his wife, who's unvaccinated, and from their daughter, who's unvaccinated. So they're the only people in our family that are not vaccinated, but it's a sad, very sad situation, and he could use your prayers. He's not on a ventilator. He's a little better, although my sister-in-law is, you know, she thinks 95% of oxygenation on a pulse oximetry finger thing is fabulous when you're on oxygen. And it's not so fabulous. You probably all know that. But anyway, and I am having some surgery on December 2nd. I have 2 vertebrae in my lower back that need fusing. And most of you already know I have 7 fused in my cervical spine. So I'm a little worried about having surgery, but I'm having a lot of pain. And I'm starting to have difficulty walking without pain. So I appreciate you, Phyllis, saying those things, because some days my life is just totally full of grief. And there's not much I can do about it. I think my brother is in the hospital for a long haul. And I pray all the time that he'll have a journey that allows him to return home.
Beth, you and I have a great deal in common, including nursing, but going beyond nursing. I have family in the Midwest and I have family in the South. And I get regular urgent requests to give up everything I'm involved in, like being with you all and other things. It's just a war, and it's difficult. Where is your procedure scheduled? December 2nd.
It's scheduled right now at Parker Adventist, but and that's because
which hospital?
Yeah, Parker Adventist.
Oh, mine's freezing up here.
And but it may be moved because they're moving procedures around quite frequently because of COVID. And you know, they may postpone it, but according to the surgeon's office, it's scheduled to go on December 2nd. So I'm just prepping forward to do that. I would imagine by the time we have a meeting in January that I'll be able to attend.
Wow. In the meantime, Beth, we keep you close in our hearts and prayers, you and your brother, and I'm sorry for all you're going through.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all.
I want to say I love being part of this group.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah, it is. It's a very supportive group. We've grown. There's a lot of energy, very intelligent, faith that focused. Can't say enough good things. So thank you for everybody's participation and for all that you bring to it. Take care, everybody.
Okay,
Okay, blessings to all.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.